Morning, boys. What's going on?
Well, you got the story. You wrote about it. The Bears impacting the line of scrimmage. The Bears finally getting to the kind of rebuild that includes getting starters on the offensive line, 3 new interior starters. They really got through that checklist, and 2 guys on the defensive line. One is an All-Pro, former All-Pro, in the middle of the line, which is a huge aid, and then of course getting a version, if you will, of the kind of player that the defensive coordinator likes in Dayo Odeyingbo. So interesting combination of players there with Grady Jarrett and Odeyingbo. I think that the headline's the center because of how much money he gave him and right out of free agency and all that, but pretty good work all the way around.
Yeah, they got some big guys, right?
Right.
That was what the focus was. They've got some big, athletic players that should be able to help them out. Now, as you look at the puzzle, putting it together, some of these are shorter-term fixes, but shorter-term fixes that should make them a better football team this coming season and serve as some pillars in the locker room for a while. Like Grady Jarrett is an established, known guy that does things the right way and has been that way throughout his career. So is Joe Thuney. So having guys like that in the locker room, I think, will make an impact for them pretty quickly.
Brad, what does your information tell you or the people you have spoken with about the Falcons' interest in keeping Drew Dalman in Atlanta but not being able to meet the Bears' price, as well as the report somewhere that said that Drew Dalman actually turned down more money to go to the Bears because he wanted to be here?
Yeah, I don't know about that. When you talk about more money over 3 years, $42 million. It's probably semantics to a degree, right? Like it's a little bit more money. It's maybe structured a little bit differently. I don't know. Yeah, the Falcons would have loved to have kept him, but they were backed into a corner with the salary cap. They would have loved to have kept Grady Jarrett, but that was a transaction that freed up, I believe it was $16 million in cap space for them yesterday by releasing Grady Jarrett. Now he's an older player. He's got 10 years in the league. He's played in 150 ball games or so. The Bears aren't buying, prime years of Grady Jarrett, but I think there's reason to believe that he can still be an impactful player for him for 2 seasons, and that's pretty much what the guarantee kind of covers in the contract anyway. So Dalman was a popular guy. 49ers probably had interest in him. I suspect the Chargers could have been in on him, and he took advantage of free agency. Like Drew Dalman is the second highest paid center in the National Football League now. I don't know how long he'll be there. That's where he's at, and that's what happens when you get in free agency. There's an overpay element to it, and fortunately for the Bears, with Dalman and with Dayo, the defensive end from the Colts, they overpaid on players entering their second contract, right? And those were the guys, I think I mentioned it yesterday briefly, those were the guys there weren't a ton of in this free agent class, as players that were 25, 26 years old, ready to begin their second NFL contract. And so if you're going to overpay, which you naturally have to do in the early hours of free agency, definitely better to overpay on guys in their mid-20s than guys that are, 29, 30, 31.
It's interesting you talk about the big guys. The great George Young, the great football executive, he termed the NFL draft as the dance of the elephants. because of the need to use that draft to get those big guys you're talking about. And as we sit here this morning, I can understand the feelings that the Bears are free to go any route they want to go. But in the back of my mind, I think the dance of the elephants, and I keep thinking, if you really want to get good on the offensive line, on the defensive line, don't stop now, boys. Just keep going. Keep adding to this mix. That way you'll have guys in the room that can learn from these guys. You'll have guys that are able to step in so that hopefully you got Caleb Williams here a long time and you are drafting people that will be able to slide in when these guys are gone. And when they aren't there, you're still getting a good offensive line. That's how you get sustained success. And really the mistake the Bears have made up to this point is that they weren't really investing in the dance of the elephants.
Well, and when they did, they had mixed results, and oftentimes they waited to make that investment when there was really almost no other choice. And so I'm with you. Like if they want to make a convincing argument that, hey, we did everything we could this offseason to become a better football team in the trenches, they've got to lean toward offensive line, defensive line in the upcoming draft. It just makes sense. Like you look at what they've done on the offensive line, and they've got a center. Okay, that guy should be there for a while. Tooney and Jonah Jackson, again, those are short-term fixes. What do you have going on at left tackle? How do you feel about that? What's going to be available? And then on the defensive side of the ball, there's no such thing as having too many pass rushers. The Bears are nowhere near in danger of that being an issue, right? Like they don't have enough of them. So keep going, especially if you look at it, top 40 or so picks where they're going to have 3 selections, and say, hey, this kind of meets up with some of their needs and the strengths of the draft. And I understand it's a great draft for running backs, and at some point they should grab one. But I think they need to continue the off-season theme as they start looking ahead to the draft, because their big spending could probably be wrapped up here. Like, I know that they would like to get a contract extension done for Kyler Gordon at some point this offseason, but I think in terms of like splash signings where you're like, wow, he's getting paid, Grady might have been the last guy that they're grabbing on the open market that they're paying a lot of money to.
So, Brad, obviously, Javon Dexter means a lot to this defense. It did last year, but I wonder what you think signing Grady Jarrett means for his development or Zach Pickens' development. They're different categories, but Andrew Billings is coming back. They tendered Chris Williams. They signed Grady Jarrett, and they're counting on Javon Dexter. How much? Does this say anything about their confidence or lack thereof?
I think they're counting on him a lot. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you got to be counting on him on Dexter to develop and break through a good deal, right? Like when you talk about trying to keep those guys fresh up front, you need a minimum of 3 guys to play about 600 snaps for you a piece to get to 1,800 snaps. We got 2 defensive tackles. You're probably going to need closer to 2,000 snaps. You're going to need a 4th guy in there. So I don't think this says anything about Dexter at all. And considering Grady Jarrett's age and that he had an ACL like 2 years ago,
right?
I'd be careful how much they play him, especially on early downs. Like you're not buying, you're not buying Grady Jarrett to play first down for you. You're buying Grady Jarrett to play in passing situations, 2nd and 8 plus, 3rd down, things of that nature. Now you mix them in a little bit early in the game to get them rolling, but you bought him to play in your nickel. And then Dayo's a guy with his length and athleticism you wonder if they're going to have situations in their sub packages where he's kicked down inside as well. You talk about that great length at 6'6". He's like 285 pounds or so. Getting him to attack the edge of a less athletic guard for an opponent with shorter arms, and that gets real intriguing, I think, in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he can play like this, and it was good to see that he had a good year, but he's kind of in that Cam Jordan role if you think about Dennis Allen defense, right? He's the guy that has the great wingspan. He's got the body, the height, and the weight to do the things. Now, I don't know that he's that kind of player, but that's kind of what they were looking for. When you see him, you say like, oh, that makes sense. That signing makes sense in terms of what you've seen from the defensive coordinator in the past.
Yeah, I mean, you put those guys, you put him side by side with Montez Sweat, and those are some imposing guys. Just taking a look at them, so they've got that going for them. They've got that quick twitch guy in the middle, and that's what's amazing about Grady Jarrett is he's still got that really quick first step that people look for from that three technique tackle. So it was I think it was a good day for the Bears. I think they kept the focus where it needed to be. They didn't try to get cute or anything like that. And now they have to kind of fill in around that. And you're also going to hit a point here, and some teams will be there sooner than others. Like the Bears, it's possible the Bears are already there. I don't know. But you get a point where you got to take a step back from the marketplace. You got to take a deep breath, and you got to let things just kind of cool down and chill out, so the prices drop. Right. Like you can't continue in this situation where some of these players are getting an awful lot of money, and then you talk about letting players come to you and looking for value and things of that nature.
So after they do that, second wave, third wave of free agency, Brad, how would you prioritize these positions? Running back, safety, backup quarterback. Do you think the Bears are in the market for all three? And do you think that they would consider any of those a priority?
I mean, like they got a 90-man off-season roster, so you've got to fill some guys. If they're out shopping for a running back right now, I think that's with an eye almost exclusively to special teams. Like, this is a great draft for running backs.
Right.
Like you're not going to do better in free agency right now than you're going to do in the draft. If you want to go out and sign a guy who plays some running back, but it could be a potential special teams guy for you, maybe compete to be in your core on special teams, go for it. Safety, yeah, I think you got to let the market cool down a little bit. The money was hot for safeties yesterday,
right? Which
was a little bit of a departure from last season when I think I mentioned this to you guys before. There were teams around the league that thought the Bears had gone too fast and too high for Kevin Byard and sort of upset the safety market in free agency a year ago. But Byard turned into a solid player for them, and they're going to need some depth there. We don't know how the new coaching staff feels about Elijah Hicks as a depth player, but you would imagine someone else competing in that role. So yeah, they've backup quarterback. Who's the guy? What's the fit? I mean, there's so much that goes into that. Because you're talking about, hey, they got to go out and get this guy, but we don't think he's going to play. I know they've been talking about the possibility of a veteran quarterback in that mix, but that doesn't mean that it'll necessarily happen.
And at some point, they probably need another wide receiver. At some point, they probably need another tight end. I'm just saying, I'm not talking about replacing people, but there are definitely holes. You just got to get people in it.
Yeah, and a good draft for tight end,
Right.
As well. And yeah, the wide receiver, they'll probably add a couple here at some point, but they need a guy that you can take a look at and say, yeah, I can envision him as a number 3 wide receiver.
Right.
And it makes sense for him to be in the mix here. So, they've got to get a long snapper. Like there's a lot of stuff they need. But you would think by the end of the week, it'll mostly be calmed down. And then before too long, they turn the focus to the draft, and it would be a really slow trickle of players coming in. You get a couple here and there, but these could be some important players that aren't coming in early in free agency that compete for jobs, win jobs, and then play roles on the football team.
So based on what happened yesterday around the league in terms of the quarterback position, who's the starting quarterback for the Vikings when the Bears play them next year for the first time?
I mean, I think it's JJ, right? Like that. It's been JJ all along in my mind. That's why Sam Darnold was headed out. Unless something physically goes wrong for him, I think he's the guy there. And you look at that Seattle contract for Darnold, and I don't think it's out of whack when you consider the quarterback market. I don't know what the Jets are thinking with Justin Fields. I don't. There's a reason why Mike Tomlin changed starting quarterbacks when he had a winning record last season, right? And and Mike Tomlin's a guy who has done it at a high level for a real long time.
Yeah, but what are they doing? What are they doing? Are they going to go with Russ? Are they bringing in Rodgers? That's insane, isn't it?
That could be Rodgers, right? Yeah,
wow, I'd love to see that. Yeah,
that's an organization that had a high-level starter in Roethlisberger for a long time, and really struggled to develop a plan to after that ended. And it's hard, right? It's really difficult.
Did anything surprise you yesterday? Was there any? I thought that Josh Sweat didn't get as much money as I thought he might get, especially coming off the Super Bowl bump. But he got a lot of money, crazy.
He's like 28, though. I mean, he was in Philly for a long time, had some injuries earlier in his career. Javon Kinlaw got a ton of money from Washington.
Yeah.
And I know that one turned some heads around the league. Like, really? They're going to pay him that? And I don't know the fine details of it. If you just look at the numbers, it's like 15 a year, and that just doesn't seem real wise. But you know what? That was a roster with Adam Peters at GM and Dan Quinn at head coach that basically completely turned over in 1 year, and they did a lot of really smart stuff and got to the NFC Championship game. So maybe they deserve the benefit of the doubt there in going after a guy like Kinlaw.
Great job, Brad.
And who on their bingo card had Larry Borum getting a job before Tevin Jenkins?
That's a good question. To the Dolphins. What was the money on that?
I don't know. I can't be very much, but I had a guy last week, seriously emailing me, like he wasn't playing around, that like the Bears should franchise tag Tevin, and I'm like,
wow.
Buddy, he's not going to get that much money over.
Was that
2 years, probably? Yeah, it was unbelievable. So
he loves talking to him.
He'll get a job here at some point, and it might have to be a prove-it deal for him, right?
Yeah.
Great stuff, Brad. Thanks a ton. Great catching up with you.
Thanks, Brad.